Okay, so first of all, welcome to the first common premises training that we are having, as we are now starting the rollout of common premises on the platform. My name is Vedna Ramsahar, and I lead the common premises team as part of the country business strategy section. So today's training, I'll go quickly over the agenda. We're going to break the session into two because the training is pretty long. So we'll cover the efficiency agenda, what it is. We'll give you an overview of common premises, some key concepts. What is the country common premises plan? Because this is what is going to be on the platform. And then we'll take a break of 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about the Stocktek exercise, which is what is now being done on the platform, followed by a platform demonstration. I'll also let the team introduce themselves, Rodolfo, Gabriel, Alex, and Tommaso. Go ahead.
Hello, hi everyone. Nice to see you all here. I'm Rodolfo. I'm a colleague of Vedna in the CBS. I'm a data and reporting officer, and I'm supporting the development of the platform.
Hi everyone, very nice to meet you all, and thanks for joining. My name is Alex, and we are assisting also with Gabriel and Tommaso the CP project.
Hi everyone, I'm Gabrielle. I'm also supporting the development of the platform, and will be presenting you the Stocktek exercise later in the training.
Good morning, I'm Tommaso Maria Payar, and also working with Vedna on common premise and development of the platform.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, to the next part, which is the efficiency agenda. The efficiency agenda is where common premises is located, is why in the first place we are doing this exercise. Now, what is the efficiency agenda? As you all know, there have been a few reforms going on in the UN since a couple of years. So we have the management reform, we have the development reform, and the peacekeeping reform. The efficiency agenda is the operational portion of the development reform. And for in this reform, what is different from other reforms? The Secretary General was clear about now in the development reform, it's no longer about piloting. It's about getting the strategy scaled up and implemented in all the 131 countries. So what is the efficiency agenda? The efficiency agenda is composed of 3 enablers and 4 targets. I'll start by the enablers. The first enabler is the mutual recognition. And so far, it's been signed by 21 agencies. What, in a nutshell, is the mutual recognition statement? It's basically saying that agencies recognize each other's procedures and policies, and there is no risks in adopting or using each other's policies and procedures. Now, mutual recognition is a work in progress. The high-level document has been signed, but it is yet to be operationalized because there are many details to be worked out in recognizing each other's procedures and policies and using them across agencies. The second enabler is the client satisfaction principles. So in a nutshell, all agencies that are providing services to others, may it be procurement, may it be HR, may it be admin, ICT, are now bound under the client satisfaction principles to have a quality indicator of their services, followed by a review of those indicators and the reporting on these indicators on a yearly or bi-yearly basis in a view to improve the quality of services that are being provided to other agencies. And the third one is the costing and pricing principles. Whenever an agency has needed services from another, what we've seen is that there are differences in prices from the same service that may be offered by WFP and by UNICEF. Now, under the costing and pricing principles, there is the aim is to have transparency on what you are paying for. Because usually what happens is under the services, say under HR services provided by WFP, you have a certain menu of items, and under the one of UNICEF, you have a different one. And that's where the difference in prices comes. So you are able to see exactly what is it that they are offering as part of the services. And for you to be able, as an agency buying those services, to pick the ones that's necessary for you. Now, as you will see, these three are enablers. They are crucial to be able to do the work under the One UN, the operational work under the One UN. Now let's come to the targets. The first target is the business operations strategy, or the BOSS 2.0, as you have all heard about it. And where we stand now, we're supposed to have 131 countries with bosses by 2021. We are now at the count of 124, or yeah, I believe 124. We have 7 left to be completed. So congratulations to all countries who already have their bosses, and to the ones who are yet who are at the finish line of their bosses. The second target is the common back office. Now, the business operations strategy rests on 7 key service lines. And the same service lines are being implemented under the common back office. As the name suggests, the common back office is for location-dependent services, and it aims to provide a common back office at the country level. A team in the country business strategy section is working on common back offices. And the project has been launched a couple of months ago, and they're now working with their first group, cluster A countries. So that's an initiative that's ongoing as well. The next one is the global shared service centers. So it's even a step higher than the common back offices. What we're saying here is what we've been mandated to deliver are global shared service centers. So services that can centers that can provide services centrally for the whole world, or for that matter. Now, the global shared service centers is at the beginning of the designs. So there are reviews going on. There was a draft that was created. So it's pretty much in discussion, and we don't anticipate it to come for rollout, at least for the next year or two. But it's there and it's coming. Last but not least, and why we are here today, is common premises. The SG's target on common premises is to achieve 50% of common premises by 2021. And we're going to see how we can, I don't know if we can achieve the 50% target, but at least make a progress towards the common premises percentage in all countries. The next one, please. So the common premises overview. As mentioned, the target of the SG is to increase the proportion of UN common premises to 50% by 2021. And the first thing to know is the definition of common premises. A common premises is a building or compound that houses 2 or more agencies. And in parallel, we have the concept of a One UN house, which is a common premise, but which also houses the office of the RCO. So de facto, there can only be one UN house per country. What is important to note here regarding common premises the target is on all premises in all the cities that the UN are working on in. So it's not only about having this one beautiful, humongous one UN house in the capital and forgetting about the other cities where the UN are working in. There is also the need to look at the possibilities of consolidation into common premises in small cities, maybe where there are 3 small UN offices. The numbers count because they also form part of the baseline that we are showing. We're not saying that we do not want those beautiful one UN houses, UN representations at the country level or capital city level, but we should not also forget that this agenda is for all UN premises. Next one, please. This is the definition of common premises according to the task team on common premises. You could go ahead and read it, but we will also share it in the manual. It's actually what it does say, and we're going to go over different parts of the definition as we progress in the presentation. Is first of all, it's a key enabler for common services and shared services between agencies. It is, as mentioned, 2 or more United Nations entities present in one building in a country. And the main objectives of common premises are cost efficiency through reduction of operational cost, effective utilization of shared resources, enhanced security, and unified presence at the national and subnational level. Again, we have the definition of the one UN house. What it says, I'm repeating what I just said before, it meets the minimum criteria for common premises, and the one UN house must accommodate the office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator. And what we want to also say here, a one UN house is not necessarily a standalone building. It could have satellite premises and maybe to referred to as UN House Annex. So more on that, we'll explain more on that in the CP manual. Let's go to the next one, please. Now, why common premises, right? Efficiency gains. So we've seen that through common premises, we are able to achieve rental savings, rental cost reductions. And sometimes it's not apparent in the first years that you establish a common premise. But when we look at the long term, we do get efficiency gains from rental cost. There's a huge possibilities in utilities, in cost reduction in utilities and maintenance cost. Maybe by the sheer fact that when we move into common premises and we're doing refurbishments, we're upgrading buildings, and also because of the shared factor. There are efficiency gains in terms of interagency travel, fuel, and vehicles. Because if you have common premises, this reduces the travel for meetings amongst agencies. And there is a potential efficiency gain into the reduction caused by the reduction in security costs. Meaning that instead of having 17 compounds around a city, you may have 2 or 3. Yes, they are bigger and they may require more security, but it's still a reduction in numbers. In terms of quality, so common premises doesn't bring only efficiency gains, it also brings quality gains. Regardless of the city you are in, but it applies especially to the main capital city, having a UN building, in essence, is actually enhancing the UN presence status in the country. There is the opportunity of space optimization. When the buildings are designed properly, there's a better quality of working environment. More safety and security improvement features can be achieved in the building. Accessibility and inclusiveness can be part of the building. It builds on the One UN culture. And last but not least, it does have an impact on interagency collaborations, partnership, and in-program delivery. It's much easier to go and talk to your colleague 2 floors down than knowing that you have to go across the city to meet that person. Now, on top of that, common premises also enables the business operations strategies and the common back office, because it eases the provision of services to other agencies. If you're located in the same building, it's easier and more comfortable to do so. The next one, please. Now, where are we with common premises? This data extract is from the UN SMS database. There was an extract that was carried out in March 2020. And we're looking at 2,441 premises globally. And when we say premises, we're looking at office premises. We're not looking at warehouses, guest houses, and so on. We have concentrated on office premises. And from the data that we have, we see that we have 476 common premises today, which represent 22% of the pie. We have 284 single premises that cannot be consolidated because they are a single UN presence in that city. So nobody to consolidate with. And the third one, the one that we are concentrating on, are single premises that could potentially be consolidated. And we have 1,681 of them, which represents 78% of the pie. Now, you can understand for yourself that moving from 22% to 50% is a big job that requires the assistance and the efforts from each and every country team that we have. Apart from that, we've also looked at a couple of other indicators on premises. It's not only about the number of premises. How about the number of people, the number of personnel? So what we've found surprisingly is that 45% of personnel are already located in common premises. What that means that in those 476 common premises, we have 45% of the UN workforce. So the remaining 55% are in 1,681 buildings. And that kinds of demonstrates to us how many small single premises we probably have in many of the smaller cities around the UN. The second indicator we've looked at is the percentage of UN entity offices that are in common premises. 54% is an average. And what we mean by that, for example, is that UNDP has 80% of their offices already as common premises. WFP, for example, is at 47%, and FAO is at 11%. But when we look at the percentage, it's 54%. Now, our mandate is to reach 50% common premises in terms of numbers, but we'll also be showing in our reports about those 2 other indicators, because I think they're important to show that it's not only about the number of buildings, but it's also to show about the spread of the buildings and the concentration of the buildings and how agencies are doing. Because we have to understand that some agencies like WHO and FAO and some others have difficulties in co-locating. So those indicators kind of broaden the perspective on the numbers about common premises. Have the next one, please. Now, the agenda of common premises is owned by the task team on common premises plus facility services. Now, what is the task team on common premises and facility services? First, this UNDG task team on common premises and facility services reports to the big task team, which ultimately reports to the UN SDG team, chaired by the DSG. Now, it sits in a similar position to the BOSS and the CBO task teams. So we report into the big task team. Now, what exactly does the task team on common premises do, and what it's its mandate? Right? It has been tasked with providing guidance and tools to UN cities that engage in the construction of a one UN house or common premises renovation, any projects. And then to enhance efficiencies as well as increase the number of common premises worldwide. Who are the members of the TTCP plus FS? As you can see on the right, there are quite a few agencies that are part and sit on the task team on common premises. And any project that involve several agencies that are planning to co-locate have to submit their projects to the task team on common premises for review and recommendations. The task team per se does not reject a project, but it provides recommendations on what needs to be done, or provides guidance. Well, it does provide guidance, but it also provides recommendations on how a project needs to be moved forward. That being said, we will touch base in more details on the task team in the other parts, not in this training, but when we move to other parts of the platform. But for you, what's important to know is that any project, there's a format. I mean, there are templates that the task team on common premises have created that actually eases the setting up of common premises. So if you need any guidance, you could write to me or to the Secretariat of the TTCP to help to be able to guide you through the process of preparing a package to the task team on common premises. And have the next one, please. Okay, so we have this beautiful agenda of reaching 50% common premises. How are we going about it? So the strategy pans on 4 key areas. One is the planning and reporting strategy, which we are doing in this exercise and which we're starting to do now. So that's the country common premises plan on which is mandatory on the common premises platform for each country. Because where we stand now, we do not have premises data globally, validated premises data globally from which we can report on. We do have premises data where they are located in the number, but when reporting, we also need to know what are the projects that are ongoing. Yes, we know it because we receive emails, but we do not have it from a platform, from a certified base to be able to draw a report, a structured report, and show it to senior management. And the country common premises plan is also a planning tool. We'll come in more details on that later, but it's also your planning tool, your blueprint on how to move ahead in common premises in a structured way. The second pillar that we're looking at is resources mobilization, because it's not a secret. I know I've seen Lorik as one of the participants. He knows this very well. And it's one of the frustrations of common premises is that you could prepare a project, everybody is happy to go, but then boom, there's no money for the construction. No agency has money to upfront for a capital construction project. Then we resort to going to a developer and paying rent and so on. And this is a complicated formula. To be able to help to assist and to move this agenda forward, what the task team on common premises is doing is having a resource mobilization strategy for capital funding of common premises. That includes a model where an estimate was put together of how much money would it need to reach 50% common premises. Secondly, how do you get resources for common premises from member states, from donors, from private sector? And if you do get those resources, how are they going to be managed? That's an exercise that's currently going on. And the exercise we should complete that exercise by the end of the year and present something concrete to the BIG, with the hope that there would at least be some resources given to common premises projects. The third pillar is training, and it's actually capacity building. Because common premises, there are two parts to it, right? One, it's what we are doing now. We're showing you the process that you need to go through for common premises to build them. But then there's the part when you're actually carrying out the project, you need professional technical assistance to put everything together, architects, engineers, quantity surveyors. Sometimes you need a contractor for building assessment. So what we're doing in this for capacity building, one, will be providing an online training on the Staff College platform by November of this year for the processes of how to go about a common premises project. So if you have one in your team, if you have one as part of the OMT, you at least know the steps to follow and who to hire. And for the purposes of the technical assistance, for now, we are heavily relying on UNOPS and some project managers that we have on a roster. But we want to provide country teams with an LTA from whom they could pick for those technical services. Last but not least is project implementation, which works with everything else, but it's important to know that as we are planning, we also have countries who are implementing projects. So as the task team, we are supporting and guiding the implementation of projects from inception to completion till the keys are handed over, and that would continue. But there is a need to initiate more projects. So the country common premises plan helps to have a real estate strategy to look at initiating common premises projects. So this is what's being done in a nutshell to achieve the 50% common premises, with a huge risk of the finance. The next one, please. So what are our options for establishing common premises? What can we do? I mean, when we look at, say, I'm in a city and I'm looking at what are my options? The first option, the one that is quick, no, not quick in terms of it can be done in 2 days, but quick in terms of as compared to the other options, low cost as compared to the other options, is bilateral consolidation or consolidation within an existing premise. So it's looking at the actual space that's being occupied in an existing premise and see if another smaller agency could join that premise. And this option is valid in capital cities, but it's very valid in smaller cities, where very often we've seen from the data and from the discussions that we have that there are offices of 5 people or 7 people, 3 people, and they're sitting in separate locations in the same city because they're from different agencies. So that kind of consolidation is greatly encouraged at the agency level. Secondly, are the government-provided rent-free buildings. So it's also a preferred option since we currently do not have capital funding. So in this option, the government provides an existing building that's refurbished according to the UN needs to the UN agencies in the country, or it builds a new building according to UN specifications to accommodate the UN agencies. And that's a project that, as you can understand, is pretty complex because there's a lot of negotiation with the government, and it's a project that involved usually multiple agencies. So it's a project that's guided and submitted to the TTCP for review. The next one, funded new construction or funded building by the UN. So these projects are less common, but they do happen because sometimes agencies, not sometimes, according to their budget, they are able to fund either the buying of a building or the construction of a building for their own agencies. The ask there is for agencies when they are going for that modality to see if they can pair up with another agency who's able to fund the capital fund and work with them so that they create a common premises. The fourth option, which is very common because it's not everywhere that the government can provide us with a building or the agencies have money, is a UN lease commercial building. Now, through our discussions with country teams, what we've noticed is that in many cities, UN entities have joined that city at different points of time and have taken offices wherever they could at the time and stayed in those offices. So we see UN offices in residential buildings, in old buildings, in a floor of an old building, or in super new buildings, depending on when they joined and what was the situation then. The effort there is to come together and look for one leased commercial building or two leased commercial buildings, however is possible in the real estate situation in that country, to see if how many agencies can one building accommodate also depends on the composition of the country in terms of UN entities. But the idea is to lease together a commercial building. Now, pursuing a new lease generally means an upgrade in the working environment. So a newer building, which de facto usually means lower utilities and maintenance costs. The rent could be a little bit higher or lower, but there's always a good possibility for negotiation with the landlord because the UN is known as a show payer, and having the UN lease a whole building is a very attractive prospect for a landlord. Last but not least, we have the public-private partnership. Now, there was a model that was very common in the last 10, 15 years, because government started to give land to the UN family. And as of now, I think we still have about 15 plots of lands globally that we have not been able to build on. So the government gives land to the UN for an indefinite period of time and expects the UN to fund and build their own building. Now, again, our main risk, there's no capital funding available for common premises. So what happens in this situation, what was done, is the UN goes to the government and asks the government to engage a developer to fund, design, and build the building. Now, that building is going to be owned by the government. But on the other side of the coin, the government and the UN sign an MOA whereby the UN commits to paying back the cost of the building over a certain period of time. Now, this is a model that can work, but it's also a very risky model. We have many UN houses in these situations, but the risk lies in when this project is done, we know about how many agencies are going to be there. But throughout the years, some agencies move out of the country. But the UN UN is committed to paying back to the government a fixed amount of money yearly under the public-private partnership. So that's also a consideration when going for that kind of project. The next one, please. Okay, now common premises and the UN SDGs. Premises in general, and especially common premises, since we're talking about renovation, refurbishment, and so on, allows all UN entities and us as staff members to actively participate in the UN SDG goals. Because a big one, sustainability measures and accessibility measures can be implemented very easily at the planning stages and implementation levels subsequently when we're doing a renovation or the construction of a new building. One thing is what is very important to note is if as the UN we use space more efficiently and we reduce the built footprint of the UN, we are already contributing to lowering the carbon footprint of the UN. And then, of course, there are other measures such as water recycling, solar panels. I mean, there are a lot of them that have been detailed. The TTCP has worked with UNEP, and there's a sustainability guidelines that needs to be followed during a common premises project. Additionally, the TTCP has adopted the ADA, the American Disability Act, and International Building Codes on Disability for any UN premises. And this is part of the construction guidelines that is generally shared to any members that are about to engage in a common premises projects. So the guidance is there for the design of the renovation. We just encourage all of you to take it into consideration when you're actually planning a project. The next one, please. So I'm going to share a few key concepts that we're looking at. So touch base briefly on this, right? When we're talking about the number of premises, the 2,441 premises, there have been some entities and office types that were excluded. So first of all, exclusions have been according to the agency type. So anybody who's not part of the UN development system is not part of the agenda. They could occupy, rent a floor from a building where you are at, but they're not part of the agenda. Learning institutions, because of their functions, have opted out of the agenda because they're mostly, I mean, they're not your typical office situations. The World Bank Group and IMF have also opted out of the common premises agenda. Peacekeeping is out and in at the same time. What it means that if there's a peacekeeping mission and it's a single premise, we do not count it when we're doing the baseline calculations. But peacekeeping missions are known and have been able in many locations, in some they have not been able to accommodate or to host other agencies. Then they become a common premises. So when we want to say there, when you're recording information on the platform, if you see in a building there's the World Bank and WFP, it's single premises. It's a single premise. But if you have the World Bank plus WFP plus UNDP, then it's a common premises. So basically, you're counting the agencies that are included in the agenda to be counted as a common premises. On the other side, if you see a peacekeeping mission that has accommodated WFP, yes, it is a common premises. Now, when we talk about office types, as mentioned before, warehouses, guest houses, temporary project offices, hotels, and I mean, other little office types that maybe we have not captured, they are not part of the calculation. Now, the common premises platform allows you to record these office types, but just know that you're recording them. It's not going to be used for anything. So it's a good to have maybe for you to know where your warehouses are or in the country or in the city, but it's not really necessary for the exercise that we are doing. Let's go to the next one, please. A premises lifecycle, and this is captured on the common premises platform as well. So before anything happens, there's an initiative. What is an initiative? An initiative is a discussion that has not been concretized. So the government is talking about offering a building to the UN. UNDP and UNICEF are talking about co-locating. Those are initiatives. And yes, we want to capture those on the platform also, because knowing about these initiatives helps the OMT to see what are the possibilities. But that's what it is. It's an initiative. Then the next step is an initiative becomes a project. So when does an initiative becomes a project? When there are key milestones have been reached. Now, we'll be providing a common premises manual, and we've really detailed that in which scenario, which milestones have to be reached for an initiative to be counted as a project. Now, a project is going on, you're designing, building, moving. The project becomes an active premises the moment the building is handed over to the UN. So the moment the building becomes the responsibility of the UN, it's counted as an active premise. So regardless if the staff is moving 1 month later or 2 months later, the moment the keys are with us, it becomes an active premises. Then, as sometimes happens, the UN moves out of a building and the building is transferred back to the owner, to the landlord, to the government. The moment this building is transferred back, it becomes an inactive premise. And an inactive premise can be reactivated through a project. And that's why you see the arrow there, right? Maybe there was a building that you gave back to the landlord, and then 2 years later, you're like, oh, it still makes sense to occupy this building now that we have a change in the composition of staff. So that's a possibility of reworking an inactive premise into a project. But what's important to note here, that an active premise can have 0 occupants. And we've seen for a fact in a few locations that there are abandoned UN buildings. So the UN is still responsible for these buildings somehow. Either it still holds the lease or it owns the building, but it's not occupied. And these are also captured as active premises under the platform. Now, the Common Premises platform tracks those steps, and Gabriel and Alex will show you how this is done in the platform when we're doing the premises validation. So you could record a premises as active, but you don't put any occupants there. At least we know it belongs to the UN, but nobody is there. The next one, please. The compound as common premises. This is included here because we've had a couple of questions about those. So what's a compound? A compound is an enclosed plot of land where several buildings sit. Now, a compound de facto is a common premises when the buildings on the compound accommodate 1 or more UN entity. So if on a compound you have 5 buildings, one is by is only UNICEF, one is occupied only by WFP, one is only by UNDP. There you already have a common premise. The compound will be looked at as common premises. We're not going to count the single buildings as single premises. Even if there is a door in the middle of the compound, a wall and a door, but the access is free between the 2 portions of that wall, it's still a compound counted as a common premises. So if you have such a situation in the country where you are at, the platform allows you to record a compound and then to record the buildings under that compound. But we will count the compound as a common premises for your country. The next one, please. Okay. Calculating space needs. So as part of this exercise, we'll be also looking at what are the space needs of the UN. Now, space needs are calculated according to the CMP guidelines that were adopted by the task team on common premises. What are those guidelines? Those guidelines, first of all, look at staff and their grade and what are the approximate allocation of staff of area per grade per staff member. I mean, you can see the table. D2 has usually 25.8 meters square. Most of staff have 9.6 meters square. So based on your number of staff, you can estimate what is the area that's required for your office to function. This table, this first table that's there on the left, it only shows you the area that you would, the office area. Then once you have the office area, usually there are percentages added for the loss factor. So for elevators, stairs, and toilets, columns, and so on of the building. There's a percentage that's added for circulation inside the building that's lost. Ancillary areas include all your meeting rooms, copy rooms, kitchenettes, all the smaller facilities that are needed to run a building. So there's a percentage of your office area that's added for ancillary areas, and then there's a smaller percentage for outer walls. All in all, those guidelines, and there's a spreadsheet for it, and we're going to calculate it automatically in the platform also, following the guidelines of the TTCP, help to actually estimate what are the space needs of your agency. Or if we're going to do a project, what is the total space needs? What is the total space that we require? Because that's your step one towards identifying a building or a construction project. Now, these are estimates, right? These are your preliminary estimates. Because once a building is purchased or leased, evidently that area will change slightly or to a certain degree because of the building or the planning that's going on. But that's your starting point. What are your needs? Now, in the calculation of space needs, we do include office area growth. So we don't want to go for a project that will be ready in 3 years. And then when we move into the project, we're like, well, we calculated space for staff 3 years ago. So now that we have 10 more people, what do we do with them? So there's an element of growth that's included when you're calculating your space needs. And that element of growth, I mean, it varies. Sometimes it's known because agencies are more or less in a position to know. But for most of us, we don't know what happens in the UN. So the general guideline there is anything between 2 and 5% of your actual staff numbers should be your growth. And last but not least, these standards are not an entitlement. So a D2 cannot come and tell you, I have 24 meters square. The guidelines are 25.8. You have to give me 25.8 meters square and so on. No, those are guidelines, not an entitlement. And they're actually the maximum standard for office space. But see, I mean, if you see you see that a D2 is being given 26 or 26.5 meters square, it's fine. But then if you're providing a cabin of 45 or 50 meters square, when your task team will look at it and senior management will look at those figures, they will go like, well, why are we wasting 25 meters square? It's not according to the guidelines. So we need to be careful of how we're allocating space and how the estimates actually translate when we are looking at office buildings. I mean, we'll detail this also more in the manual. The next one, please. Okay, so this is food for thought, right? We all know that since the past year, most of us have worked from home. There's been the pandemic. So what does the office of the future look like? We don't know. And we're actually carrying out an exercise, right? About what is the right working model for our organization. What will the post-COVID office look like? How we can manage our facilities services in the post-COVID scenario. And what we are seeing is a trend towards a flexible work arrangement, meaning that a hybrid of partial work from home which also implies that the built office footprint would reduce. So most staff would not need a fixed place in the office. But I'm not going to elaborate further on this now. I wanted this slide to be there for you to be aware that the future work is not going to be as before COVID. So whenever you're planning a project and you're thinking about your space needs and so on, also discuss this within your teams. How do we want to work in the future? Yes, we'll be providing guidelines, but it's more about looking at holistically about how we'll work for the future. A hybrid working from home, if possible. Do I need so much space for my office? How do I manage my facilities? So to kind of start thinking about it when you're doing the real estate planning for your agencies. The next one now, please. Okay. The country common premises plan. Next one. What is the country's common premises plan? The one before, please, Alex. So, oops. What is it? The country common premises one. Can we have 21 first, please?
Yeah, this one.
Sorry. Yeah. So the country common premises plan. What is the country common premises plan? And this is what we are doing. This is the rollout of common premises. We are asking each countries to have this country common premises plan on the CP platform. So what it does, it assists country teams to make informed decisions about their real estate portfolio and advance the common premises agenda. It's your blueprint of planned projects for implementation towards the CP goal. So the CCPP, no matter about staff change, RC change, the blueprint of your projects is there on a platform for continuity. Now, the country common premises plan can be updated at any time to reflect events. So you're going to put one up now, but maybe 6 months down the line there are changes, right? So you could record these changes on your plan. And what the platform will do, it will simply be creating different versions of your plan. But every year you will be required to review that plan on a mandatory. Maybe there are no changes. You just review and say, fine, there are no changes. I'm good for, say we put this plan in 2021. In 2022, we do the review and say, I'm happy with the plan. There are no changes. Fine, but we'll just need to do that review in case there are changes in your premises situation or in your staffing situations, whatever it is. Now, how does the common premises plan work? It has 4 key, we can describe it as 4 key steps. The first one is the Stocktek. So the Stocktek is about where you are now. So we'll look at where you are now. Then we work with you to do a real estate analysis to identify projects that are possible in the cities of the country where you're located. And then based on those projects, we submit those projects to the UNCT, and then they can decide and say, you know what, we'll do project 1 and 3. So those projects 1 and 3 are further taken for analysis. We do a cost-benefit analysis and a qualitative analysis, and presented back to the UNCT, who would say, okay, cost-wise, it makes sense to follow up on this project, and that becomes part of your plan for implementation. Now, this is very broad. We have the next slide where each step is detailed. I have 22, please. So the first step is the Stocktek exercise, which we are doing now. So we're collecting data. So we're validating existing premises. What that means is that we have a list of premises in the platform coming from the UNSMS database, but we know that we have a March 2020 extract, so there's likely to have been changes. So at the country level, you will need to look and verify whether those premises still make sense. Are their address correct? or are they inactive? Are they active? Are there new premises? So you are able to add new premises, and you are able to expire the ones that are not part of the reality now. Secondly, you'd be asked to enrich existing data. So different kinds of data that we'll go deeper into when we work in the platform. So what's the area? What's the capacity of the building? Are you planning any major work in the buildings that you're currently occupying? What are the costs of using that building, rent, maintenance? What are the contractual agreements that are actually part of the usage of this building? So we're capturing that data, and then we're also looking at the space needs of each agency. Now that would be our as-is situation. And that starts now for Group A countries, for most of you. And once we've done that, starting from November, we'll start working with you also on the platform on what we call option identification. So work with you for a real estate analysis and see, I mean, sometimes is there a sense of creating a common premises project? Can two agencies in small premises be co-located? So that's about looking at all the options where you can actually increase the common premises percentage of your country in every city. And as said before, that list is brought to the UN city. And for the ones that they see make sense on a political basis or they approve, a cost-benefit analysis will be worked out. Now that part consists your plan. And once we have this on the platform, it means that you have a plan ready. It's ticked off. The rest of the work, the planning framework and the implementation monitoring, happens on the platform, but it's not time bound because we do understand that projects can take 2 to 3 years, right? So, but you would be required at key steps in the project to actually update the platform. So if construction started, you will update the platform and say that construction started. Construction finished, tick, right? And then you will, once the premises become active, you register you move the the project from being a project to a premise. So in a nutshell, you monitor your premises situation of the country through the platform at a very high level. Next, please. Okay, enough from me. So we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll go for the break. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, Sukro, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Edna. Very interesting presentation. I have a question regarding this developer. What is sort of prescribed, or what the guidance tell us is that UN goes to the government. Government then engages this developer. Say invests and builds the premise on the condition that UN will be occupying this for say several years, etc. So this is clear, but do we have any sort of like real cases in the past where this worked, or it is only as a kind of like a theoretical approach what we have now?
No, we have quite a few examples of those. The latest one, the last one that was done is Eswatini.
Mm-hmm.
I think they moved into the building in 2017 or 18, I believe. But then we have other examples. Madagascar was built in that way. And there are a few others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, quite a few others. I mean, those two are on the top of my mind, but we do have a few others.
Okay, and can we get some sort of brief information, or like say summary of those cases, so that we could also use them for any discussions which may arise?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll share it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I mean, and it's not only about the summary of cases. We also need to look at the lessons learned in those instances.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I see a question from Ramesh. What is the estimated total cost to achieve the target? So that model has been estimated based on the data that we have now. And we're looking at and what it came out to be is about, I think, between $250 to $300 million. Once we complete the Stocktek exercise, we'll be in a better position to refine that model. And once it's refined and shared with it will be shared with the task team on common premises. But now, very roughly, we are somewhere between $250 to $300 million. And why the World Bank and IMF have opted out of this agenda, I don't know the exact reasons, but I understand that, they run their facilities in their own way, and they decided not to be part of this exercise with the UN at the onset of the efficiency agenda. Are there any other questions? What is coming on the... Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
This is Claire.
Yes, Claire.
Let me say thank you for the detailed presentation. I just have one question. Now, with the different models that you've outlined, I see that they are based on the various experiences we have now. But at what point in time does TTCP come in within these different models? Are we required to involve TTCP at each of these models, or there are those that can be managed entirely at the country level without the involvement of TTCP? Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. So I'll make sure we include those in the follow. I mean, to go more into details in the TTCP flowchart in the following trainings. It's just been hard to condense this one into 2.5 hours and cover everything. So yes, so projects that are bilateral don't need to go to the TTCP. It's the business of two agencies. So if UNDP decides to take on UN Women in its own premise, it doesn't need to go to the TTCP. They need to record it on the common premises platform because we want to know that there's a new common premises that's happening. But no, the TTCP is not involved. The other projects where the TTCP are not involved is if an agency like WFP or UNFPA are building their own building along with a sister agency, they don't need to come to the TTCP because the money is coming from them and it's their own agency projects. Again, we need to report it, and it's good to advise the TTCP that this is going on. But their recommendations are not really required in those instances. In some cases where you have 3 agencies co-locating together, they still don't need to come to the TTCP. What is very important to come to the TTCP are the ones where the government is giving a building. When the government is providing a building to a multi-agencies, then it has to come to the TTCP. Now, if the government, as part of a host country agreement, gives a building to ILO, the TTCP doesn't get into that. But if it gives a building to the one UN or a piece of land to the one UN, then yes. If it's a developer-led project where there is funding from multiple agencies, then yes. Now, the TTCP, one thing about the TTCP, right, it does provide guidance, it does provide a toolkit, but it also facilitates the project on the ground because the agencies sitting at the TTCP Those are mostly the same agencies that they're on in the country teams. But the ones sitting under TTCP, the staff members sitting under TTCP, are from the agency's headquarters. So that eases the coordination of, say, UNFPA is building something, is participating in a project in Malawi. And the fact that this project is being looked at the TTCP, so the HQ partner is sitting on the TTCP of UNFPA, there is that flow from headquarters to the country team, and it helps a project. Now, to your question about when a project is submitted at the TTCP, there is more guidance on it. Usually, there's a TTCP flowchart that explains explicitly what needs to be submitted at the TTCP and when. So at the onset of the project, it's good to make it known. But then whenever there's an issue at certain points, even if we have not reached the full package, we can come to the TTCP for guidance. But the submission of the package is usually when a project has reached a certain stage. So you know why we are doing this project. The government agreed. We have our space needs sorted out. We have our commitments from agencies in terms of an LOI. And well, DSS has approved whether the building or the land. So at least there is something concrete going on to come to the TTCP for discussion. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it has answered my question. But part of the reasons why I've asked is the fact that perhaps it might be good to assume that agencies do not have the right capacity on the ground in terms of guardians. And so regardless of if it is a one house or a shared office, there are certain criteria that we have to meet. And then that comes back to who then validates that a premise, regardless of what it is, has met certain guidelines. So that is the thought that I have in mind. It is good that we have these options, but I feel that at some point in time, there has got to be an external team that will validate to say, look, what you have established today, even though it is not required to come to the desk of the TTCP, but it must meet A, B, C, D guardians. Thank you.
Right. I mean, you're right, Degley. It's true that the TTCP doesn't have this capacity on the ground today. It does. It could help with capacity in the sense that it has a roster of project managers that is available, right? So for any projects, you could call on this roster of project management and the country team can hire them. But unfortunately, the country team has to cost share that technical resource. Secondly, UNOPS is always available for that. And thirdly, I mean, we are trying to put together an LTA to provide that technical assistance. And from what I understand, what you're looking for is an occupation, a kind of an occupation certification. So prior to the UN moving into that building, somebody has said that it is safe and good to move in. I mean, the SS will look at its part, obviously, but then when it comes to structure and so on, that's what we're looking for. We can come back on more on that, Clay, because we'll make sure that it's included in the manual and in the following trainings. But I do take note that this is an area of that needs to be taken care of, to be given more attention to. Thank you. Damira?
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Vedna. Thank you for today's training. I just wanted to confirm what was discussed now, that if the building is provided by the government to one agency and the in-host country agreement, it's co-recorded the premises under the specific agency, and then that agency later on, in coordination with other UN entities, make a plan to accommodate them within the same premises, we do not need to go through TTCP, I'm right? Since
Yes.
for the government, the building is only like responsibility of the lead agency.
Well, that's where the difference is, right? And there have been some confusions there. If it's part of the host country agreement, and that agreement specifically mentions that the agency, WFP, UNICEF, is the receiver of that building, no, there is no need to come to the TTCP, because that means the agency is making space for other agencies in its own buildings.
Okay. Thank
right?
you.
But
Yeah,
if
yeah,
if the agreement mentions that the building was given to the UN family, but led by agents, I don't know, by UNFPA or UNICEF or UNDP or WFP, then if there is a common premises project, there is a need to come to the TTCP. So it all depends on what was written on that agreement.
No, the host country agreement mentions, in this case, ESQA, and since we are accommodating many agencies now, we tried even, to amend host country agreement, like having some kind of tripartite agreement and this, but the government exclusively said we do not want to enter into it. We gave it to ESQA. It's up to you the way you will manage it.
No, you don't need to come to the TTCP. But I mean, if it's a big project, Amira, and you need help, the TTCP can provide guidance. And secondly, as a courtesy, I would just bring it to their attention that such a project is going on, but more as a courtesy.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, I see Alessio's comment that given the multiple scenarios, I feel it might be useful to have a guidance with reference cases requiring the TTCP's attention. Alessio, this is definitely taken into consideration, and we will make sure that that guidance is available on the online platform that we're developing, the training, and also in the manual. Okay, and I see from Sukrob, similar question. If premises are provided by the government, there is an agency quitting from the compound or in opposite entering the CP, do we need to go through the TTCP? No, if there's one agency is quitting or entering, it doesn't need to go to the TTCP. And who should initiate? Well, if it's something that can be managed by the host agency, by the leading agency, that's fine. You don't need to go to the TTCP for those, Sukrob. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? So what we're going to do, it is, for me, 7:18 New York time. I suggest we come back and at 7:35 to come and resume the platform training. Okay, so we'll leave the session open and we'll start back at, say, in 15 minutes. Good? Okay, thank you. See you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, so, well, that's the issue with online training. You see everybody, but you're not sure that everybody is back. So shall we give a couple of more minutes and then start?
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll give a 2 more minutes and then go for it. Okay, so let's keep going. The common premises plan, the Stocktek. So that now we're getting into the actual what is it that we are doing now. So all Group A countries are starting their common country common premises plan. And it all starts with the Stocktek exercise. So Alex and Gabrielle will take you over the platform in a couple of minutes. But what is the Stocktek exercise on the platform is divided into 3 different parts. The first one is the kickoff. So the main coordinator or the common premises champion kicks off the country common premises plan. And what's there is a description, is a brief description, right, of the country background, the platform, what kind of premises you have, how many cities, and so on. And that's just to say that, you know, the work has been done and now we've started that plan. As part of the kickoff also, the common premises champion assigns roles to anybody else who are going to use the platform. Then we move on to the second part of the platform, where we're actually carrying out the premises validation. So the validation of existing premise. Is the list of premise that is on the platform correct? We'll need to say yes to the premises that are okay. We verify the, you'll be asked to verify the addresses and add missing premise. And we'll also add projects and initiatives in that section. What are the projects that are ongoing and what are the initiatives, what are the discussions that are going on in the country regarding common premises? So those are added in to determine the premises footprint. And the third part is about the premises attributes. So for each premise that you've added, we have to look at the data on the premises, right? So who are the agencies occupying those premises? What is the area of those premises? What is the capacity of those premises? And then as we dig deeper, agency focal points will be requested to enter their office space requirements, their cost, and the contractual agreements about each building that the UN is in. Have the next one, please. So for the Stocktek, there are 6 main stakeholders that can work on the platform. The one who we call the common premises champion, and usually by country we have 1 or 2 common premises champions, 3 if it's a very spread out. I mean, premises are spread out in many cities. The common premises champions are the general coordinators of the country common premises plan. Per se, the common premises champion has some key roles. He or she kicks off the platform, but then coordinates the plan. And also at the endpoint submits the plans, right? But the common premises champion also has the ability to enter data at any stage. So depending on the situation that the country is working on, if it's easier for a couple of common premises champions to gather the data and work on the platform, that's also possible. The second, usually the common premises champion can be both from the RCO and from the OMT. So as part of this exercise, right, we'll ask as part of the country common premises plan, as was asked by the director of DCO, we're asking for a common premises working group to be created at the country level. So it would be a good practice to have the common premises working group chair and somebody from the RCO as common premises champions. The second role is the premises validation focal point. So checks and validates existing premises, adds premises when not in the platform, or inactivates, retires premises also. So that exercise is done in coordination with the security focal point, because in any country that the security focal point has the list of all the buildings that the UN are in. So we do recommend talking to the security focal point on this. Well, the role can be allocated to the security focal point, to whoever is going to do the premises validation. There's no restriction on who this role can be, which staff member this role can be given to. But it's good to know that anybody working in OMT and so on may not be aware of certain buildings that fall under the jurisdiction of the UN, but is not occupied. But that information will be known by the DSS focal point. So there's no way that you complete that step without talking to the security focal point. The third role is the agency focal point. Now, as the name says it, the agency focal point adds projects and initiatives or enter occupants' data and contractual agreements for their own agency. So if I unpack this a little bit, if I'm from UNDP and I'm the agency focal point, I will be providing data about UNDP buildings, any bilateral agreement that maybe UNDP is considering with another agency, and on contractual agreements on how UNDP is occupying buildings, as well as the number of personnel and the space needs of UNDP. Then the fourth role that we have is the common premises working group member. Now, the common premises working group member is one role, but it can be assigned to multiple staff members. So the team of a common premises working group members, what they do, they mostly look at premises level data, especially when it's in a shared or common premise scenario. Because then if we're in a common premises scenario, there's to say, okay, which agency enters the data? No, then we ask the common premises working group member to coordinate and collect that data and to enter that data. It regards occupants' data, contractual agreements, and so on. Then we have the common premises working group chair. So the Common Premises Working Group Chair monitors, along with the Common Premises Coordinator, the high-level process. And last but not all, we have a quality assurance that's done throughout the process. I will get into it in more detail. So when you fill in the data, we'll be asking another country, similar to what was done in the BOS, to make sure to quality assure the data. We're not expecting that person to know everything about the premises, but just to have a look to understand, are there like major discrepancies in the data that was entered? For example, that I'm looking at the data, I'm quality assuring the data of, say, Kosovo, and then I was like, why are they paying electricity for $1 million? So we're looking for that kind of coherence. Or if fields were just filled with a comma, just to make sure that it's filled. I mean, it's that level of quality assurance that we're looking for. The next one, please. So here's the Stocktek diagram flow, which is a combination of the previous two slides. The Common Premises champion enters the background data and kicks off the plan. Then we move on to the second portion, which is the premises footprint validation. So the premises validation focal point checks, coordinates with the SS and validates the existing premises, adds premises that are not in the platform, and that ends that part for the premises validation focal point. But as part of that section, there's also the adding of projects and initiatives. So that can be done by the Common Premises champion, by the agency focal point, or by the working group member. It's a combination because, like I mentioned, we have different kinds of projects. So it could be agency focal points will enter initiatives and projects that are led by their agencies. The CP working group members will enter projects and initiatives that are multi-agencies. The CPC at this point is not supposed to enter data, but he or she has the ability to enter data. And we just leave it open to kind of coordinate, depending on the team that's there on the ground, on how best you see fit. Because if it's easier to collect that information and two people sit together and enter the data, that's fine. If it's we are in a multi-city place where we need data from, say, 10 other cities, then it might make sense to have different people working on the platform and the CPC coordinating with the main staff members in different cities. So once we've gotten the premises footprint, we move to the premises attributes. So in the premises attribute, we ask the CPWG member to enter premises level data. So area of the premise, capacity of the premise, and if there are any planned investments to the premise. Once that's done, the CPC or the CP working group member verify the list of occupants by building. So we already populated by building that's from the database, the occupants the agency occupying those buildings, but this needs to be verified. Once this is done, then the agency focal points enter agency data, and they also enter contractual agreements. And similarly, we've left it open that the Common Premises Working Group member and the Common Premises champion are able to enter data as well. Okay, so what we've tried to do is keep it flexible so that you organize at the country level, the team, how best it fits what's happening on the ground and the situation that you have in the country. I saw this question before moving of who selects or nominates the focal points. So we've asked that the Common Premises champions and working group chairs are selected at the OMT and RCO level coordination. They decide as a whole of who are those the main focal points. Agencies are, of course, required to nominate their agency focal points. And for the Common Premises Working Group member, we leave it open because there will need to be a few working group members along the line. So we do ask for somebody from DSS to be part of the working group, because as we move along in the CP process, if there's an identification of land or building, they will have to play a part. We ask for an ICT counterpart for the same reason, for an admin counterpart for the same reason, but then to have a few agencies also who are part of that working group. I think that's left to the country team to decide. So the next part, we now get into the platform training demo, and I'll hand it over to Alex and Gabrielle to carry forward. Over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venna. Let me steal the screen up. Great. So as Venna mentioned, now it's time to walk you through the platform in itself, and more precisely the Stocktek part of the platform. As Venna mentioned, the purpose of this phase is to map the current premises situation in your country or in your data station. It also serves to prepare for the next steps, such as the real estate analysis, the identification and planning of common premises projects. More precisely, the Stocktek part consists of creating an up-to-date database of UN premises by recording all existing UN premises and their attributes. It can be physical attributes, contractual agreements, by recording any ongoing projects in the pipeline, by recording, as Venna explained earlier, the space needs of the UN, and finally, by recording the financial data related to premises. It can be investments, for instance. So as you can see on my screen, the Stocktek part is comprises three main steps. The first one is the background, the second one is the premise validation, and the third one is premise attributes. And so, as Venna just mentioned, roles has been given to the users in the platform. Each of them have been granted specific rights. You have the CPC, the general coordinator of the plan, the CPWG, whose role is to oversee the process, and the other roles Venna mentioned. So the goal right now would be to go through each of the steps to have a comprehensive view of what we expect from the phase one of the platform rollout. What I suggest is that we will go through each of the steps, and at the end of each step we will collect your questions so that we interact as much as possible if you have questions on what we just explained. So first things first, let's log into the UN platform. The first thing to do would be to log in using this link and entering your credentials. When you sign in, you have this page that is appearing. As a super admin, I have more rights than what you will see. But what is really interesting for you is to go to look at the common premise segment and to look at the country that is important for you, that you are going to enter data on. For the purpose of the training, we are not going to play with the production site, which is this one. We have created a specific training link to ensure we are not mixing all the data. So now perhaps let's have a look at the first step of the platform, which is the background. Here, this step is pretty simple, right? The only one action required is from the CPC, so the Common Premise Champion, and his role is to enter the country background, just here. The description could include any relevant information about the country, such as the size of the UN city, such as the security level, and such as any other relevant information about the country. No action is needed on other fields. You will see for information on the right of the screen an auto-generated plan ID number, which is basically the unique number of your plan. And please note also that the plans are set up on a yearly basis and that the start date and end date are auto-generated. For information, you have here the list of users that have been registered to this plan. Once finalized, you can save the country background and go to the next step, which is premise validation. Here you have two means of going to the next step. The first one is to click on this button, premise validation. And the second one is to click on this next step button. Before handing it over to Gabriel, who will present the premise validation part, I just want to explain to you what happens just after logging in. So just after logging in, you will have access to the dashboard. The first things you can do is to select the country on which you will perform your work. Select common premises here, which is basically a filter of all the plans created. And then you will edit the plan that is attributed to your country by clicking on Edit. And this is how I entered the CP training plan. For information, if you don't find a plan created yet, it's normal. We are going to create them centrally, and this will be done in the upcoming days, normally tomorrow. So do you have any questions before we hand it over to Gabriel, who will present the next part of the training?
I think we could go on. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect. Gabriel, I'll let
Thank
you
you.
the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much for presenting the background. I'll go to the premises validation step. Let me share. So here we are on the second step of the plan, which is the premises validation step. Its aim is to identify all UN premises in the country. The designated premises validation focal point, a user Vedna mentioned earlier, is responsible for completing this step, which is, it consists in two parts. One, the validation of existing premises, which are here listed. Just to mention that the out of scope mentioned here is going to disappear. It's only on the demo version. So the first part is the imported premises. And the second part is the addition of new premises here and deleting expiring premises, which are no longer under the management of the UN. Basically, identifying all UN premises in the country. The list of premises to be validated is imported from the UN SMS database. To find the premises to check data for, amongst those, the user can either scroll down the list and look for a premises in particular, or use the search option here by premises name. The data, so if we enter in a specific premise, let me sign in again. If we select a specific premise, we would like, as a user, we would like to complete data here or to amend it if needed, if incorrect. So the data indicated here, we will go through it field by field. First, the user should verify if the premises is in the correct city. In case there is no city, it can be added in two ways. First is selecting in the city in the dropdown here. But if the city is not present in the dropdown, it can be added manually, clicking on cannot find your city and typing the city name here. We'll select one of those. Second, just about the city, if the country you're entering data for is part of an MCO, you will be able to select the country in a data field. We can try that for Mauritius, for example. So if I change workspace and select Mauritius, I can see that on the same step, here I can select the two countries of the MCO, Mauritius and Seychelles. Now we can go back to Lebanon and continue our demonstration. So once the city is selected, if the premises is part of a compound and the compound doesn't appear in the list, so it can be selected here, but if it doesn't appear in the list, the user can enter the compound name by hand, clicking on not found in the list. This name will be added to the list of compounds in the country and will appear in the future dropdowns of the compounds for the other premises. Next, the user can add or modify the name of the premises as it is usually referred to. The name should be unique to the premises. Next step is to verify the address and modify it if necessary. The coordinates will be automatically picked depending on the address. They can be refined clicking on Open Map, dragging and dropping the pin in order to have more precise address. On the status field, you can select active or inactive. You should select active if the building is still under the purview of the UN, regardless if UN staff is occupying the building or not. Select inactive when the building no longer belongs to the UN. We'll select active. On the status details field, enter any reason associated with a change in that status. Once all data has been entered, as we saw, it should be, and the premise has been declared active here, the user confirms the validity of the premises by approving it here on the security approval. This can be done by selecting approved here. And once approved, each premises should be saved here. The delete button should only be used in case of premises added by mistake or in case of duplicates in the premises list. Once the data is complete and saved, just as we did, the successfully validated premises will be marked with a check symbol here. If an existing premises does not appear in the list, it should be added by the premises validation focal point. And this can be done clicking on Add Premises here. So the same data fields should be completed as for the existing premises that we just saw before saving or clicking on Create. With the validation of all the premises in all cities of the country, the premises validation focal point has completed his or her part of the Stocktek exercise. So we talked about the premises part here. The next thing that I would like to bring here is about the projects and initiatives that Vedna mentioned earlier. So in addition to the actions performed by the premises validation focal point, the rest of the team should add projects and initiatives as applicable before populating the attributes in step 3 that we will show after. So we can start adding projects and initiatives. 3 users will be mobilized to do so: the CPC, the agency focal point, and the CPWG members. To add such projects and initiatives, the user should click on Add Premises and select in the face project or initiative before completing the data fields. So when should project be selected and when should initiative be selected? Vedna started to explain it earlier. Let me explain it again. A project is when a concrete milestone has been reached, and an initiative is when the project is still under discussion. For example, a discussion with the government for a building is an initiative, which will turn into a project when a building is identified and accepted by the UN. You can refer to Annex 1 of the manual for more information on what consists in a project or an initiative for the different consolidation modalities. And here, to add the projects and initiatives, the fields are very similar to the ones we saw for premises, except a few additional fields. First, the category of the project or the initiative. The category can be selected among those 4 choices. For some project categories, a source of funding field will appear, where you will have to select among a few answers. Future actions can be then indicated. Their next steps that should be written as a text. It could be signing the letter of interest, for example. And finally, a security recommendation document, a security risk assessment document, should be uploaded for projects. If it is available, it should be uploaded also for initiatives. And to finish the creation of a project or an initiative, you can click on Create here. When data entry is ready for quality assurance check, it is time for the CPC to lock the entire step, now that the entire step 2 has been completed. So the CPC can lock the entire step. And to ease data verification, you might have seen it here. Some intermediary locks are also available for the other users. So now we have completed step 2, the premises validation step, and we can move to the next step, premises attributes, clicking either on the name of the next step or at the very end of the page on next step here. So are there any questions on this step 2? Please don't hesitate, and otherwise I'll give back the screen to Alexandre to present step 3. Okay.
Sorry, Gabriela, maybe because you are sharing the screen, so you cannot see the hands raised.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I can see, now I can see it.
Yeah,
I can see Damir. Yes, you have a question.
Damira from Esqua. I have a question. I do not know is it now right time to ask or no, but for example, if we have a building that it's already, you know, co-shared by co-located agencies, and then we have ongoing projects of renovation within existing facilities, is this going to be recorded somewhere as a part of project or initiatives, or this comes later on?
Let me take that one, Gabriel. Yeah. So, okay. So if you have an existing premise, it's already an existing premise, right? So we validate it and we make sure it's in the list. But that doesn't stop you from adding it as an initiative or project if there's something going on in the building itself. Right now in this Stocktek exercise, we're recording very high level what projects and initiatives are being worked at, right? I mean, what are they? But after we do the real estate analysis, it's going to be reported in a more structured way. So yes, if you have discussions ongoing, you can record it as an initiative as well. And if it's a bit more concrete, you can record it as a project as well. So there's no restrictions to that.
Thank you.
Great. Is there any other questions on the premises validation step? No? Okay. So now let's move at the next step, which is the premises attributes. Let me share my screen again. So this step allows to enter further information for each premises, projects, and initiatives that were saved or created in the previous steps presented by Gabriel. The information will be built around three main building blocks. First of all, you will have information on premises, which can include description, whether it's a government collocated premise, what are the level of investments planned in the next years to refurbish the building. You will have also a second building block, which is all about entering information on occupants, including operational costs. And finally, you will have a third building block in this step, which is all about contractual agreement. When filling in this step, the first thing to do is to select on this drop-down the premise, the initiative, or the project you want to add data on. So if I want to add data on a specific project, I can, and then I need to switch and add data to the other premises that has already been validated in step 2. So for the purpose of the training, let's have a look at the premise Gabriel just created, which is this one. And first, let's start with the premise level data. So this part. First things first, the CPC and the CPWG members are responsible for filling this part for each premises, project, or initiative. Let's have a look at the fields. They should first enter a description, which could include the premises status, whether it's a temporary or long-term premises. So let's say a long-term. It could also include the list of occupants and any other relevant information that is worth mentioning, typically the office type, for instance. Then the next dropdown is about government collocated. What it is, it means the offices are located in a government facility. Let's say, for the purpose of the training, that it's a yes. As you can see, there is a new field which just showed up, and this field is called government management. The question here is whether or not the government runs the maintenance of the building. If yes, then you need to click yes, and it's government managed. The next field is about premises space in square meters. It's the gross area of the portion of the building occupied by the UN entities, and this is typically the area that is listed in the contract documents, such as the leases. You then have the premise capacity, typically the number of workstations in the portions of the building occupied by the UN entity. Then it's time to decide and to select the premise ownership. Several choices here. You have whether it's a UN owned, whether it's a lease, and so on and so forth. You have more detail, of course, in the manual. And you finally need to select whether or not this premise has a restriction to host. It can be the contractual restriction, whether there is a security restriction, whether there is a space restriction, and in case of other restriction, you need to add a few details on the restriction. The next portion of the premises level of this step is the investment. Here the question is simple. Is there any planned investment for the next 7 years? Let's say yes. You can see a series of fields just appeared, and we need to populate the total investment, of course. And if you have the detail available, you can also populate all the detail. Please note that if the sum of all the detail does not match the total investment, it's an issue. You need to have exactly the same number here and in the total investment. To conclude the premise level of the step premises attributes, just want to point out this specific field, which is the premise type. Nothing to do on it. It's automatically calculated by the platform, and it's taking into account whether the government is collocated or not, and also the occupants that are appearing and that will be filled in during the filling of this step. Typically, if you have 2 occupants with offices in scope from different agencies, then you will have like a common premise. If you have only 1 occupant not in scope, let's say a warehouse, then it will be out of scope. So the next step is to fill in the occupant data. The objective of this section is to complete data for all occupants of the premises. This part has been pre-populated from the existing UN SMS database. And here there are kind of 2 sub-steps. First, the CPWG member or the CPC needs to verify the list of occupants of the premises. At this stage, an occupant can be deleted or added very simply. If you want to add an occupant, you click on this button, add an occupant, and you select the organization and the name. Once done, you can click on create, and we have just created a new occupant. To delete an occupant, also pretty straightforward. At the end of the occupant field, you have a delete button just here. So once the list of all the occupants is validated, which data shall we enter in the platform? First, the organization name, of course, and the name. The name of the occupants should be uniquely recognizable. Then you can select the office type of the occupant. Typically, let's say country office. You also have the office space to fill in, being the gross area as per official records in agreements, and the office capacity, which is here the number of workstation available in this office. For the last 2 fields, let me precise that we are talking uniquely about the occupied space of the individual occupant only, not the entire premises. As you know, the entire premises data is filled in above in the platform. Of course, in case you cannot find the organization, you can type the organization. Then it's time to write a short description of the office. Let's say WFP, perfect, prepopulated, located inside the UN compound, 3rd floor, building A, for instance, anything that you deem necessary. And then you should decide whether or not the occupant is the common services manager. Typically, when the UN office provides the service of overseeing the facilities management of the premise, is the common services manager. Then you need to decide whether or not there are restrictions to relocate. It's a bit similar as what we've seen above, but above it was restriction to host. Here it's restriction to relocate, and so typically we cannot relocate because we had a recent major investment that prevents us from relocating. Then the next step is to look at the current work modality. Typically, whether currently you are on physical presence, a hybrid presence, or fully remote. And you need to enter the current number of desks per personnel. Here, we need a number between 0 and 1, sorry. And for instance, if you fill in 0.5 and you have 20 people, it means you have 10 desks for 20 people. Of course, in the future, the work modalities is likely to change, especially post-COVID. And so we also need the future work modality, as well as the expected future number of desks per personnel. Here, same thing. You need a number between 0 and 1. If we have 0.6 and we have 10 people in the office, then we have 6 workstations, 6 desks per for the 10 employees. We need after to enter the number of national personnel and number of international personnel, current. And this is also something that we need to detail in the next table. On this table, you can see the type of the employee, and then the 2 columns, which is the current number of personnel and the estimated future number of personnel. Here, the idea is to fill in every part of the different drop-down. And of course, you need to be sure that the personnel number here matches the total number of national and international personnel. Otherwise, of course, you will have a little alert here. Something also worth noticing, you will have on the right something which is automatically calculated, which is the current space needs and the future space needs based on the current number of personnel and the future number of personnel. And also, of course, based on the space mentioned on this specific column. The table just after is just an automatically calculated table, which helps you understand what is the area required for support function. So aside from the area calculated here for workstations, you also need area for interior circulation, for shared functions such as conference, meeting rooms, and so on. And so this is something that is automatically deduced based on the number of personnel put here and based on the percentage of additional room needed for support functions. Following this step, it's now time to look at the cost. Here, pretty straightforward. We just need to enter the current annual recurring cost allocated to the office, rental rate, cleaning, and so on. We just need it in dollars. So we have went through the second part of the premises attribute step. Now let's have a look at the last one, which is the contractual agreement. Similar to the above part, the list of occupants should be validated before entering contractual agreement details. 3 users can fill in this part: the CPC, the CPWG member, or the agency focal point. If the premises is a single premises, then the data and the contractual agreements can be entered by the agency focal point. If it's a common premises, it's recommended that it's filled by a CPWG member or by the CPC. Contractual agreements include leases, subleases, MOA or MOUs, and please note that the agreement parties could be both UN and external occupants. Before deep diving into the contractual agreement, I just want to show you very quickly one slide to explain what is a parent agreement. Let's take an example. For this premises, we have 4 occupants: WFP, UNESCO, FAO, and 1 external entity. There are 2 relationships, 2 types of relationships in this example. The first one is the parent agreement, typically between the lead agency, one agency from the building, and the lessor. It can be a government, it can be a commercial lessor. The second type of relationship is the sublease agreement between the 3 other offices and their lead agency. The distinction is important here because it's recommended for you that when it comes to the platform, we add first the parent agreement before adding the subleases agreement. Why is that? It's because when you enter a contractual agreement, you will be given the opportunity to fill in the parent agreement in case of a sublease. So now let's have a look at the detail fields. You need to have the name of the agreement, which is needs to allow which is to allow to uniquely identify the contract. It can be the title of agreement, the date, the parties. You need to have the parent agreement, if relevant. The agreement type, typically if it's a MOU, MOA, standard lease. The agreement status, whether it's a draft or a final agreement. The agreement number as per the agreement itself. The lease start dates, end dates, and notice period. And then the comparison of the rent price and the market value. Here, the idea is for you to say, okay, this lease is below market value because we have negotiated or because of any reason. It's at par with market value or it's above market value. Then it's time to enter the lessor name and the lessee before entering and completing the lease services responsibilities. Typically, for utilities, the stakeholder in charge is the lessor. However, for the internet provider, it's the lessee. For the reception costs, it's shared between the lessor and the lessee. Once you have populated all the data in the contractual agreement, of course, we need to have the contractual agreement uploaded, and then you can save. To add another one, you can just click Add Contractual Agreement. I'm going to pause here. Do you have any questions coming to your mind? I know it's a lot to take in. There is, of course, a manual available. There will be also video that will be able to look at. So it's normal that it's a lot. But yeah, let me know if you have any question.
I see Damira. Go on.
I'm so sorry, but it's too many informations, and just to make sure that it's clear for us. I want to go first to premises attribute. There was investment breakdown, and for the future 7 years, as I remember.
Yeah.
Then down, it was a breakdown. Yeah. And then you told us that the breakdown should match with the total investment amount. So I want to ask first, I see in some fields there are little stars, and I assume these are mandatory fields to be populated. If there is no star, do we need to input data, or this can be added later on during the review and update of the platform?
So this is an excellent question. Indeed, you're right. Where you have a star, it's mandatory. And when there is no star, it's optional. So here, if you only have the envelope of investment, put the total investment, and that's fine.
So it means we can here put total investment, and since this is a long-term future that it's very uncertainty in this country, then the breakdown can be postponed for later on during the platform update.
Yeah, and Damira, I want to add something to this, right? Because usually these planned investments in the next 7 years, they can only be a budget by the time you're filling this form, right? We don't know the exact amount. So that budget amount is what you put there. Now, we're not going to track in details what is given to electrical work or security work. The reasons for it is that when you're creating common premises, it's to know that the one office has already budgeted a certain amount of money in an existing premise, right? So, yeah. And then as the information becomes clearer and more available, of course, then those fields can be populated.
Okay, I have now another question down on the work modalities. As the lead agency, we will be inputting data on the co-locating offices. Is that right?
Yes.
And then how can we know the future work modalities of this co-locating or tenants, to call them? They are not tenants because we don't have rent, but I will call them tenants now, just for clarity purposes. So how do we reflect future work modalities of the tenants as a lead agency?
Now that's another excellent question. You want to take it, Alex?
Yeah. So for of course, don't hesitate to complete what the agency focal points, right? Typically the one responsible of entering data, occupant data, for its own agency. So
it is leading agency, to call it now, for just because we are still not familiar with the technical terms.
Of course, I agree.
Okay.
My point was to say, like, it's each agency will fill in the information for the occupants.
Damira, one minute, Alex. So you have two options here, right? So either your tenants give you this information and then you fill it in, or you can ask them to fill it in themselves, because then they can have the roles in the platform to fill that data exclusively for their part, because an agency focal point can only fill in data for their agency. So depending on what's easier for you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I just want to go. So when you have add agency, we will add agency as a lead agency. We will add the tenants, occupant.
Yeah.
So we will add, for example, we have UNRWA. I don't know. I'm just list like WFP, UNICEF, and something like. We add 6, 7 occupants.
Yes.
And then we ask them to provide us with the data. But now you said each agency can be inputting informations only for its own agency. So should we ask them maybe through OMT that they register on the platform? And as we did for BOSS, we had these categories, peacekeeping, non-peacekeeping, and so they were reflecting themselves. What is recommendation? Should we channel this through OMT, or we will wait for your guidance?
So there are two options there, right? And I think for Lebanon, it makes sense to channel this through the OMT to have the agencies input their own data because of the size of the country and the number of people that you will need to collect data from. But from what I see from smaller countries, they are collecting the data offline, and one or two people, the lead agency or the premises working group member, is putting in the data. So
yeah, no, as I'm saying, you know, we are anyway as a lead agency managing the space, and we know the occupancy per square meter and what kind of service we provide.
Yeah.
It's only this little fields like, you know, the future work modalities, or, you know, number of G staff, P staff, and all this.
Then maybe it's better to ask them, because the roles will be provided to them. And that's what we will be talking about to the common premises champions, also telling them that, you know, you have the ability to enter the data for everybody, but it's not meant to be a burden on one person. So yes, the agencies are supposed to be able to enter their own data, similar, like you said, to the boss.
The boss. Okay, and then I have one more question. I apologize. Down on the contractual agreements, if you can just scroll so. On the contractual agreements, it will be similar story of the above. So the
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And once more, sorry for interruption.
No,
I'm happy that you bring up those questions, because I think it helps to clarify for everybody as well. Over to you, Alex.
Great. Thank you, Vena, and thank you for your question. So now that we have seen each step of the platform, it's time to have a look at something that you have probably seen when we walked through the different steps, which is the lock step. Let me share my screen again and show you a slide. Here you have three types of lock buttons. If we look at the green one, you have a lock button at individual entities level. So for instance, once you finalize data entry for one occupant, you can lock this occupant, and it will prevent other stakeholders to modify the data entered. Of course, if you want to modify afterwards the data, you just need to unlock the occupant. You will also see some lock steps, some lock buttons, sorry, at section level. Typically, we saw during the premise attribute training that you have three main sections, right? The premise level, the occupants level, and the contractual agreements level. And so here I'm speaking about a section level lock, where you basically lock everything at occupants level. And the final lock button is the lock of the entire step that you can find here, and which can only be addressed by the CPC.
So to add to what Alex is saying is that once you've locked the plan, it means that you've finished your exercise and you're submitting it for quality assurance.
Exactly. So once the step is locked, it's time for the quality assurance to verify the data. And the process is the following. The CPC has just locked the step. The quality assurance is notified and will check the data, provide feedback to the CPC and to the users, who will modify accordingly if needed. And then after locking again, it goes back to the QA, whose role, once everything has been validated and checked is to mark the step as complete. Mark the step as complete. You can use this button, mark current step as complete. The goal of marking the step as complete is that when the 3 steps are marked as complete, the CPC can submit the plan. So if I sum up, the first 2 logs are just here to help you finalize the data and avoid any changes when you are sure of the data. And the third log button, which is the entire step log button, sends a signal for the QA to check the entire step. So what will be the role of the QA, right? So the QA, as Vedna mentioned earlier, should check if the data is coherent, checking if the description field is coherent, spotting incoherent costs or number of personnel. But of course, he is not accountable for the data entered. He must, however, ensure that the data is as solid as it could be. Do you have any questions on the quality assurance step? Yeah, Damira, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. This quality assurance is going to happen after each step, like Stocktek, and then later on, CBAs and all this, or at the end of CPP platform establishment or rollout?
So it will happen. You can log the step at each step of the Stocktek. So it's even more detailed per se. First, you log the background step, then the QA check the country background, very easy. You log the premises validation, and the QA will check, and the premises attribute. I see, Rodolfo, you have your hand raised.
The recommendation is if you can engage the quality assurance focal points throughout the process, that will definitely ease the load and make the approval of the plan faster. Because if there are any issues, inconsistencies with the data, they will be caught on earlier. They can be addressed. So definitely recommend doing it along the way. Though it's up to each team to decide on how they want to take this, but definitely having the QA on board along the process helps. Over.
Thank you, Rodolfo.
And quality assurance person or country focal point, and this will be communicated to us by DCO through OMT, through.
It's the next slide.
Wow.
Okay.
Exactly the right question.
Okay.
So typically for Group A, each of the country will be assigned a QA, which is also filling in, which is also part of the Group A countries.
So here you have your QA partner. We'll share this also. We'll share this by email as well.
And perhaps just before moving on with the presentation, I just want to highlight one last thing that I have not mentioned, is that at occupant level, we are speaking about offices, right? So if WFP has 2 offices in one premise, then it's 2 occupants. Just wanted to clarify that, as it's a little nuance that is important.
Yeah, and the best example for that, you could have WFP regional office and WFP country office occupying a building. So we register them as 2 different occupants because they pay separately. Okay, go on.
Great. So if you have no other questions, then I will keep on continue the presentation. This slide, like now it's time to operationalize a little bit. This slide is just here to say that, as you know, there is a lot of data to be entered in step 3, the premises attributes, because you have the occupants to fill in, the contractual agreement, and that for all premises, initiatives and projects. And so our recommendation would be for the CPC and CPWG member to almost as soon as possible send the list of required data to the agency focal point or the person in charge to be sure that you will be provided on time the data to fill in the platform.
Okay.
Of course, you will be granted, we are not abandoning you. And so you will have a toolkit composed of 3 things. First one is the data field snapshot, which is simply an Excel document gathering all UN info data fields, their types and who is responsible for what. So it's the platform, but the list of fields that are in the platform. You will be granted, of course, you will have access to the video trainings we are making right now, and to potentially other video trainings in different languages when they are registered. And finally, you will have access to a manual which will provide you a detailed information regarding the platform in a more precise way. Of course, that's what we went through together today. If we move on to the calendar, Venna, do you want to take it or shall I take it?
Let me take it. So we were planning to start a little bit earlier in May, but we've started in June. So initially, we said that the Group A countries have till mid-July to work on the platform. But what we're telling you is that for the countries of Group A, if it's possible, I mean, the timeline is to have this exercise through the end of July. And if it's not possible, let us know if you need a couple of weeks extra or whatever to complete the Stocktek portion. Now, to the next part.
Yeah.
So apart from the toolkit and this training, we will share with you, we have we have put out a list of time slots where you can have we can have a one-on-one session, workshop sessions with you, either me, Alex, or Gabrielle, so that as you start working on the data, I mean, we ask that you start working, look at the manual and so on. And if at one point you need support, these slots will be available, but it's on a first come first book basis. They will be made available. So if you need to talk to us, please book one of those slots. Now, if you can't find a slot and you really need help, write to us on the email address dco.cbs.cp@un.org. We'll include all this in an email tomorrow and send to you. The next one. Okay, Q&A. Are there any questions? And I'm sorry, we've gone a little bit over time. It's probably a bit of my fault also. So
I will not raise my hand. I will just jump in. When the platform is going live, when we can start inputting data?
Tomorrow. No, but actually no. What we need to do before you can start inputting data, which we are doing tomorrow, is at the beginning of the training, what Alex showed you, right? For those 14 countries, we are creating the shell of where you would be creating data. So this would be done tomorrow. Then when you go to UN Info and Common Premises and your country, you will see that plan. And you can click on edit and start entering data.
Yeah, because it will be good, you know, since summer is approaching and a lot of us did not travel for a long time. So just to know, you know, not to delay and prolong and to do the proper office planning.
Monday, Damira.
Sunday night entertainment then. No, thank you. I'm sorry for many questions, but you know, as I just for our planning, because we thought you forgot us, so you will come back to us in September.
No, I didn't. We didn't. I see, Rodolfo, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just as a reminder, as we've seen and we've gone through, there are multiple roles involved in getting the plan established and approved. So we do need all of those colleagues with those functions into the platform, especially the agency focal point colleagues. So it's really, really important to actually kindly request all colleagues to join, register on the platform, because progress will also be hindered if they are not yet registered and they need to be mobilized. So we will create the plans, but inevitably we will need all these roles involved as soon as possible.
Can I just add, and I think my colleague OMT chair, it's also attending, Mr. Mohammed, in this, to say, segregation of roles, would it, I do not know, do you recommend that we meet shortly, maybe with one of your team or sharing and see, you know, we just do not want to overload the number of staff being mapped. So we see, you know, we receive your guidance, you know, who should be mapped to what. So maybe if the beginning of next week, we can have like 10, 15 minutes meeting, you know, like about champion, sorry, agency, focal point, working groups, you know, so.
No worries, Amira. I mean, we can schedule for early next week for 15, 20 minutes just to go over that. So maybe just write to me with the best times and we'll schedule it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Sorry, can I quickly come in here again? Just to clarify, as Vedna mentioned, there are options where, for instance, the CPC can lead the way and enter the information, but it's also important to set up a chain of accountability. So as long as there's an agreement within the OMT and with the agencies, of course, then the approach that Vedna suggested as well, that having the CPC do it, it's completely acceptable, as long as there is agreement between the parties. Once we collect and report on this type of data, as we do for other elements such as the BOSS, we do have questions coming from various entities and various stakeholders on who is actually entering the data and whether the data can be trusted. So it's important just to have those things outlined from the beginning. Over.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one, Alex. Next steps. I think we're repeating that we'll be sharing those training videos. And as of Monday morning, if you have registered on UN Info and you are a common premises champion, and you have told us that we will have given you the role, you can start working as from Monday. But also, we cannot end by not telling you that it's not only about data collection, right? Start thinking about opportunities for consolidation, for moving into common premises in your relevant cities, because it's not something that's done quickly, but as you go along, start noticing or thinking about it or discussing it. That would be really help in the long run. And the last one. So in case of any technical problems or issue related to common premises, there's the UN Info Desk, a help desk knowledge base on the menu in UN Info that you can refer to. And if you don't find the answer, or if you need something else, please write to us on the co.cbs.cp@un.org on this UN address, and we'll make sure we can either have a meeting with you or help you to the extent possible. So again, I apologize that we went over time, and I hope that this was useful. So if is there anything more from you? No, I don't see anything. So thank you for attending, and we are really relying on all of you to get this exercise completed. We're ready to support you, but eventually we're relying also on you to get this exercise done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vendor, colleagues. Bye-bye.
Thank you.